Guys, should I continuously wear like ridiculous sweatsets in all of these videos? Because I think that's the move. This one is from Gap. I'll link it down below on my LTK. I'm still unemployed if you can't tell. Yay! I actually do get a lot of questions on this, and the last time I was in the store, I got a compliment on this, so I'll take it. A win is a win. Today we are going to be talking about the Cassie-ification of your morning routine, aka the morning shed. Not saying this started from Euphoria, but like not saying it didn't. I think like everything circles back to Euphoria somehow. Sam Levinson, your mind is insane. I'd say thank you, but I like don't mean it. Hey guys, what's up? It's Sam. I make video essays on this channel. I am so excited. I made my first one a few weeks ago and I think you guys really liked it and I really enjoyed making it. It was the rise and fall of Glossier, so if you guys want to check that out, be sure to check it out down below. I have a whole list of so many other topics that I think are just getting more and more exciting, so I am thrilled to do more of these. Do not forget to subscribe down below if you guys want to see more. Without further ado, let's break down what in the world the morning shed is, what this means for society, and also has self-care kind of gone too far? Let's talk about it. For those unfamiliar with what the morning shed is, it is essentially the process of taking off what you did the night before. It's seen as a self-care practice, and the way Bustle describes it as follows. The morning shed stems from the notion that the uglier you go to bed, the prettier you wake up. It encourages people to fall asleep decked out with face masks, lip serum, heatless curls, and other beauty boosting techniques. The thing that really gets me is like this uglier you go to bed, the prettier you wake up. It's kind of interesting to me because it almost puts some form of shame into like doing a morning routine. It's like doing all of these things at night versus doing them in the morning. Like one is respectable, the other is not, which is so weird. It's like the scene from Euphoria where Cassie is like going crazy and like waking up at 4 a.m. to do all of this insane stuff before school just so Nick Jacobs will notice her, and then like he just doesn't. So when you do that in the morning, that's like too far, that's crazy, don't do that. But when you do it at night, it's self-care. Obviously, this isn't the only type of video in this genre, so this notion of self-care is really expansive, and I think it plays into far more than what actual self-care is. On top of that, there's also this notion of being naturally pretty. I sort of touched on this a little bit in my Glossier video, so I'll link that down below if you guys want to check it out. But this idea of just being naturally pretty and not having to try at it is such an interesting notion because it's so not real. It's so weird to think about. Like this absolute obsession with just like waking up a certain way, like, or this whole like I woke up like this and then people would take a selfie. It's like that, but almost in reverse, where you're like, you didn't wake up like this, but you basically woke up like this. I kind of want to start off with this idea of self-care and how this real word became like a book instead of just like a word with a definition. I think one of the biggest issues with self-care is it became a word that the algorithm really recognized. So for those of you who are unfamiliar, SEO is kind of this practice of making things more searchable. So it stands for search engine optimization. Basically, it's just this idea of using certain words either in your title, maybe the description, different hashtags as well, that make your post stand out a little bit more because it gives the search engine a bit more of a push or more of a notion to go off of what viewers are wanting and what you want from viewers. If it sounds confusing, just know it's honestly not. It's just the way things are titled and the different categories things are put in essentially. It's a super common marketing practice, so I don't blame people for utilizing this word in a way that doesn't actually match the description, because it's certainly not the first time something like this has happened. I remember back in like older YouTube days, people would be like Tumblr hairstyles, right? And the idea was that it reminds you of people who are on Tumblr and different hairstyles that they would do. It was essentially replacing the word cool girl with Tumblr. So now I also see that with like Pinterest outfits, and it's not actually outfits from Pinterest per se. It's more this idea of what an outfit on Pinterest could look like. One second, I have to go turn off my AC. Again, it's like similar to this idea of like the cool girl blank. This is what this category of girl is doing. It's not literal, but that doesn't mean it can't be harmful. I think especially in the self-care category, it's such an interesting notion because that is an actual practice. And so to just put like self-care in front of doing something that isn't totally self-care is interesting. And it can be a little little bit harmful. I definitely don't think that's people's intentions at all. So when I say that, like, it's not me sitting here being like, they are actively harming society with the intention to harm society. I think there's also something to making just genuinely entertaining content that people enjoy consuming and it not actually meaning all that much. Like, not everything has to be like the end of the world, right? And I think this is an example of something that like might not be the best, but it's not exactly the end of the world either. This is such a hard category for me because I'm so stuck on how I feel about it, which I think is a really common idea for this. The comment section in a lot of these videos are like, you're doing too much, but then other parts of it are like, but some of this is actually kind of helpful, so I don't mind it. I think the problem that I have mostly with this is this notion of just being naturally pretty and evoking like this idea that even while going to bed, you have to be doing something productive in regards to your beauty. As a woman, you're never really just allowed to be. You always have to be doing something that is actively improving the way other people see you, which is obviously a big problem, and it's simply not true. You are allowed to be a human being without having to constantly make these improvements to yourself. It also goes off of like part of the toxicity of the wellness industry. It's something I really understand and content that I often consume, but sometimes I see a lot of genuinely bad things happening within that, whether it be as far as encouraging like really dangerous eating habits or giving people this idea that like it is somehow self-care to be like getting Botox. By the way, I'm certainly not against like any form of plastic surgery. Like personally, it's not something I care about. It's not something that I would ever judge anyone for. I can really understand why someone would do it, and I don't see myself not ever doing it. I think like there is a middle ground to all of it, but it's super interesting that it's a sort of expectation now, right? The notion of this sort of being a self-care thing when it actually isn't really is really not great. Self-care would actually be more along the lines of going for a walk, talking to a friend, spending time with people you love, taking a bubble bath, just things that are free and also genuinely beneficial to your mental health. I'm not saying that those moments in which I'm like doing my makeup or doing my hair or even doing my skincare at night aren't a part of that. I think there's a genuine mindfulness and there's a nice moment of relaxation and there's a moment where I feel pretty when I'm doing my makeup and I really enjoy kind of the process of it. I'm also not a fan of demonizing things that are traditionally done by women because men don't do them. Like it gives off this notion that like men are the standard and like they're correct in what they're doing, and then when women do something it's suddenly wrong, or like since it's no longer part of the standard, it's not okay and worthy of criticism. I don't think that's fair. This is kind of random, but I've always had like a really weird problem with people who are like, don't say sorry as a woman because like you have nothing to be sorry for, and they're like, men don't say sorry. And I get exactly where they're coming from. I don't think it's like meant to be harmful, and I really understand exactly what they're saying. But I also would like to point out men do a lot of things that like they shouldn't be doing, and they should be sorry more often. So I have no problem telling someone I'm sorry, even if I didn't actually do anything wrong. Like I'm sorry they're experiencing that situation, like that part's still true. Or I'm sorry maybe they misunderstood something. But they should be able to read that situation themselves as well to know like, hey, I'm saying sorry because of the situation, not because I did something wrong or because I'm accepting what you're saying. I'm saying sorry because it's just sort of a polite thing to do, and just because men aren't as polite is not my problem. I think that's just been such a thing that's been kind of like pushed into our brains that we have to like do these things that men do, and I don't like that because I have like a lot of issues with the way men do things. No offense if you're a man watching this, it's just like there is a real issue with the way like the patriarchy is run. So like I'm not always down with being like, let's do it how they're doing it. I don't want to. I also don't really see a lot totally wrong with kind of making these self-improvements to yourself. I do, however, see something wrong with this notion of like being your best self or like constantly improving, and like if you're on day 2 your enemy's on day 10, whatever. I hate stuff like that. You really shouldn't be, number one, comparing yourself like that, but you're again a human being, so like this idea that you need to be doing something all the time and like this forced productivity is so crazy unhealthy, especially when we put self-care in front of it, because that's not good for you. And we'll get more into where I can see this being a positive thing a little bit later in the video, but let's kind of talk about like the obvious elephant in the room, like that this is not exactly self-care though, right? Like it's just not. I also think that there's something that needs to be addressed about like exactly what's going on here. In a lot of these videos that I see in these sheds, it is a night mask, some type of like heatless curl going on with a bonnet over it, usually lip taping, an eye mask, like quite literally one that like covers your face. And for whatever reason, a chin strap. The chin strap is what really gets me because that does not improve your sleep. Like nearly none of these improve your sleep. This idea that we're going off of like, oh, it makes you sleep better. Wrong. I'm sorry. Putting a mask on my face and then having a strap on me and then having a piece of tape over my mouth is never going to help me sleep better. Even like heatless curls at night, I have had many of nights where I've gotten frustrated with them in the middle of the night and just taken it out. Like, I'm like, I'm not doing this. Like, I cannot sleep like that. Now, granted, I am like a bit of a finicky sleeper. I have like a hard time sleeping in a lot of situations, so I can understand how maybe that doesn't apply to everyone, but that applies to me. And so the idea of sleeping with something so odd and uncomfortable every single night is kind of crazy to me. Like, it hurts your ears, it doesn't feel good on your chin, and I can't imagine there's any real results for it either. Same with the mask. Like, this idea, it's like, oh, you won't feel it after a little bit because it'll like really grip to your skin. It'll feel like a second skin. Wrong. No, it will not. Okay, it's gonna feel like a mask on your face that just is like really stuck on there. You cannot sit there and tell me like that is a form of self-care, because that actually feels like a form of self-harm. Like, that does not feel good. That feels bad. And again, I think sometimes that is fine. Like, working out, for example, doesn't always feel good, but it can be really beneficial to your body. And not just your body, but your mind. Like, there's genuine endorphins that are released when you work out. So just because it doesn't feel good doesn't mean it's innately like not self-care or innately bad for you. But the result would just be maybe your chin looks like a little bit more snatched, or maybe like when you tape your mouth shut, like maybe that like helps your breath not smell bad. I'm still not totally clear on the taping your mouth shut thing. I know people are saying it's so you don't breathe from your mouth, you're just breathing through your nose. But I must say, as someone with a deviated septum, I think it would kill me. You know what I mean? Like, I kind of feel like that would kill me. I think I would suffocate. I don't know. I don't like that. You know what I mean? Like, not a fan. I'm sure it's actually totally like not that harmful. And there are some form of studies being done with this, but I think if you are having an issue with like breathing through your mouth at night to the point where it's becoming like excessive, perhaps go to a doctor. Let's get a sleep study done. Like, maybe the solution isn't buying tape from Amazon. Maybe the solution is like investigating this issue further if you really feel like it is significantly interrupting your sleep. Like, you might just have sleep apnea. Like, that is far more common than I think people realize. I also think part of this is like a very interesting form of overconsumption. This is another thing where I'm always kind of like a little bit split on it. I think part of me is like, this is in fact overconsumption, like buying a face mask and then having to repurchase it so you wear it every single night. And like even the accessories to fall asleep, that was like $50. Like, I ordered all the stuff on Amazon, was like $50 to buy. That's kind of expensive, right? And if we're not putting these same expectations on men, that's just another form of where women are like falling behind financially, which just sucks. Also, there's so much that women do to keep up with our appearances that costs so much money. Like, it is not cheap in this world to be a woman. Like, we've seen a lot of increase in terms of people getting Botox or lip fillers. And again, I'm really not against these things. Do what you want. It's your body. I'm not here to tell you what to do with it. But that costs a lot of money and that requires maintenance. And the makeup that we purchase is also really expensive. And then on top of that, now we're purchasing all of these steps for skincare. And now we're not stopping at skincare. Now there's also devices that you have to use when you fall asleep. You can never just have a free moment of existing. You always have to be improving the way you look. And if you're not doing that, you're going to constantly be reminded how you're falling behind and not doing self-care. That's so unfair. That's crazy, right? I don't like the idea that someone could see that and be like, oh my God, I clearly don't love myself because I'm not doing these things. Or see that and think, oh my God, that's why I'm ugly, because I'm not doing 80,000 things at night. And none of that is true. It's just a really unfair idea that like this is an expectation that you have to do as a woman. Now, granted, I will say the people who are doing this like morning shed are very much in the minority. I don't think this is something that every woman is doing, but it does point out a bigger issue. And I think that is like this fear of aging. Something that a lot of people were talking about probably like 6 months ago were the Sephora children. So basically just like these kids going into Sephora, buying all this like drunk elephant product and then making their skincare videos with it. Something I will say is I don't actually feel like this was them trying to not age. I think that's kind of ignoring something that felt pretty blatant to me. And this for them is simply a status symbol. They are aware that drunk elephant and other items at Sephora cost more than things at Walgreens or CVS. They know this. Kids aren't like immune to realizing like what capitalism is and how some people have more things than others, and like they're not immune from jealousy of that either. Kids don't really care about not aging, they care about having what other kids have. And what oddly other kids have right now is skincare. But I remember being like in middle school and wanting things from like MAC because that's what the beauty gurus who I watched on YouTube used, and I thought that was so cool. It made me seem like an adult, like a grown-up. And even this like idea of different like face masks, it's not really a new thing. I remember watching movies when I was like 10 or so, and the girls in the movie would be like in high school and they'd be doing like a face mask at a sleepover, and that was so cool to me. I remember being like elementary school aged, hanging out with my friends and us like doing face masks while watching like the Kids' Choice Awards because it felt so cool. We felt so adult. We didn't need face masks. We were doing it for like the fun of it, almost like the form of playing as teenagers. I don't think these like kids are actually so afraid of aging, but it doesn't mean that this isn't something that's being ingrained, especially into people who are a little bit more older, right? So like late teens, early 20s. There are girls who I know who are my age. I graduated college 2 years ago, mind you, who have gotten so much work done. This is not a judgment of them, and I fully understand people's skin. It's like it's all different. It's not really my business what they do, but the amount of even like influencers who I see who have like faces full of Botox, and that's considered like a relatively normal thing. And again, I'm certainly not against people doing this, but it makes you wonder like, why are you doing this? And like, why are you doing so much now? I'm in my unemployment era, as some of you guys know, and so I've had a lot of time to watch The Real Housewives, and watching them, you're like, some of you guys look goofy a little bit. Like, this is given like uncanny valley. I'm getting AI, but that's actually your face. It's really interesting how there's like this blindness and like this constant fear of aging that you are willing to look to the point of like goofy and odd. And it's not even to criticize women's appearances. It's more to say it's such a blindness and such a like, this thing is my goal and I can't look old. But like now instead I just look odd, which is somehow better, I guess. I also know like women in my daily life who are like talking about things like getting facelifts and stuff. Not that that's a bad thing. It's just an interesting thing because I feel like for so long, that was just something like celebrities did. Now we're seeing regular women feeling either pressured to do it, or now that they have access to it, wanting to take advantage of it. And again, I can't blame them. These societal expectations of women exist and they're not immune from it. It's not their fault that like women are treated poorly as we age. But it's also a really odd thing because then we're like simultaneously perpetuating the cycle of like being so afraid to age when like aging is such a blessing, honestly. Like I think that's something we often forget. We're like so afraid to get a wrinkle, but like some people don't get wrinkles, and it's a really nice position to be in to get them. To go back to that status symbol part a little bit, I wonder how much that also has to do with this obsession of anti-aging and how this all kind of ties together. So like I mentioned, kids do a lot of these skincare things because they're aware of the status symbol that it means to be able to afford certain products. But then I also wonder with women who are older, who now have access to things that they didn't in the past, is this too a status symbol for them? Like being able to afford something like a facelift. Is it so they look younger solely, or is it also because they get to show that they can afford something like that? We're not immune to the effects of capitalism, and it is okay that you're not. It's just interesting when you see it happening like right in front of you and like in your daily life. It makes me wonder if part of this morning shed process is to show, hey, I can afford all of these steps and I can afford to take the time at night to do them. I know obviously this particular moment isn't the most expensive thing you can do, right? Because there are 1,000 different things that are so much more expensive. But even when it comes to like these 12-step skincare routines, that takes a lot of time. And someone who maybe has kids, a full-time job, all of these different things, like this woman who does it all, right? And who has this expectation that she has to do it all, is now the expectation that she has to add a 12-step skincare routine on top of a full-time job and being a full-time parent? Because that sounds kind of crazy and really unfair. Or maybe perhaps that gives her about 10 to 15 minutes to herself where she can listen to an audiobook, a podcast, music, maybe like meditate while doing this, giving someone time to just spend with themselves. I think that's where I'm so stuck in this, because it really depends on how you utilize this and how the practice works for you. Because I can't imagine every time you're doing something like this, you're doing it solely for you. At a certain point, you're also doing it for the benefits of it, which is not bad. It's just how much of this one thing can give you enough of like a hit of either like dopamine or serotonin or whatever, that it makes you feel calm and relaxed and like it's self-care. At what point does the self-care turn into a forced routine? This also ties into the trend that I've seen on TikTok called like high maintenance things that I do to be low maintenance. And it's essentially going over certain things that people buy throughout the month, and they do like maybe once a month, maybe once every 6 months, to have their routines become a little bit easier. So that could be something like brow lamination, getting eyelash extensions, getting your nails done. All of these things you could argue are like forms of self-care, but they're also things that make you prettier in a societal standard, which again is not a bad thing. I don't think it's fair to like put this idea of like these standards and trying to fit into them as something that like is a bad thing, or like women should be punished for, even though like the standards are put onto us. Like that is so unfair. But it is an interesting notion of like, okay, so every month you do these things, are you doing it because you like it, or are you doing it because you feel like you have to? I think a really good example of this is doing your nails. I hate doing my nails. I hate getting them done, but I hate not having them done. I don't like the way it looks. I was like always told growing up like to have my nails done or else it looks sloppy. I even like working in corporate America, I would think about this a lot because I'm like, if I'm showing someone something, I can't have bad nails. Like they have to look well manicured. They have to look good. It says something about me immediately to someone if they're not looking good, which is so odd. I even have like a thumb. I had a biopsy done on my thumb. Everything is fine, but I had it done like 2 years ago. And ever since then, my thumb has looked so bad, specifically the nail. And so I'm so oddly insecure about my thumbnail, and it's so silly. But because of that, I always am like, no, I have to have something on it. Like it has to be done. It's not for me. It's not self-care. It's literally just so I'm not like constantly embarrassed by it, which is so weird. Before I get in the habit of talking too negatively about this, I also want to talk about like the genuine positive I can see in this. I think there is something to like this saving you time, actually. Some of it more or less, right? Because if you're like putting mouth tape on, that's not actually saving you any time in the morning. That's literally just like putting mouth tape on. Same with like this chin strap thing. I can't get behind it, but whatever. But your hair, for example, like heatless curls. I think that is something that if you're willing to go to bed with it and it feels nice, I think it's a really good idea to put it on and like do heatless curls and, I don't know, make your morning a little bit easier. It's also better for your hair. You're not putting heat on it. There's something that I can really appreciate about this. I used to do this all the time. I had a job that like I literally had zero time for myself, so it was super nice to be able to do something like this so I could show up to work looking presentable. But again, it's like this idea that we have to do certain things like that. Like I can't just show up. Something I thought about a lot in terms of like corporate America is when I would work from home, the days that I didn't have meetings, I wouldn't like do my hair, do my makeup. I wouldn't get ready. I'd just be in like sweatpants, like essentially like this, but like no hair, no makeup, right? And then I would think about how my coworkers who were men got to do that essentially every single day. I literally had so many conversations with my sister about how like 8 a.m. meetings are like super sexist. And definitely partially in jest, I would say things like that. Like I would just, it was just like a funny little thing to say to my sister. But part of that, I'm also like, I'm kind of onto something about that. Like men could wake up at like, let's say 7:30, 7:45 and have a morning meeting, especially if it's on camera, but women typically cannot. I have done meetings where I haven't been wearing makeup. I haven't like looked my best, and it was for like one reason or another. It didn't necessarily mean anything, but I would get messages and be like, are you feeling okay? Like, is everything okay? Like directly commenting about my appearance and how I looked like sick or something. And I'm like, no, this is actually just literally my face. This is what I look like. Again, as I mentioned, unemployed. So I'm going through like this interview process, right? And it's so odd because I have to think about like what I look like at all times. Like I can't just show up and be like, here are my skills. Here's my resume. Like I know what I'm doing. I have to also come in and like look a certain way. And there's a real bias that exists within this. I'm not saying that like men aren't putting themselves together for things like meetings or, you know, like Zoom calls or whatever. It's just more to say that the amount of time that it takes women versus the amount of time that it would take men is pretty significant. By the way, when I say this, like I'm assuming in these situations based on literally just the people I've worked with, like that men aren't putting in a lot of time or like wearing makeup. Obviously that does not apply to every single man, and same with no makeup. Like plenty of women probably do not wear makeup. I am talking about like my specific experience. So Just keep that in mind. I also want to get back to this notion of like women putting in time into their appearance does not equal bad. Just like men not putting in a lot of time to their appearance does not equal good. This is something that I think about a lot. So I will watch these videos where men get like toupees installed, and it's not that long of a process, but like they'll be balding in some type of way, which again, like that is a beauty standard for men, like it definitely exists, but they'll be balding, having a receding hairline, something along those lines, and then they'll get these wig installs and they look really, really good and they're super happy and confident. And then half the time I'll see like people in the comments being like, ladies, like what are you doing if this is your man? Like, oh my god, that's so embarrassing. Literally no it's not. Like literally no it's not. I don't think most women would find that embarrassing. I appreciate that a man like sees something about his appearance that he doesn't like and is willing to do things to change it. Like that's attractive to me. And the confidence that they emit after is very real. And that to me, I'm like, no, I can tell that is self-care, right? Like I can tell someone doing that is actual self-care. So why in the world am I assuming that when women do it, it's not? Like, how is that totally fair? I think that's like where I'm going so back and forth with this is like, I don't know that it's not self-care because sometimes it totally is. But again, if a man was expected to do that every single day, or the expectation was he's always going to do that, or now on top of that, he has to do like XYZ, like a bunch of additional stuff, it wouldn't be as fun. And that confidence wouldn't really come from like being like, oh my God, I didn't realize I could look this good, or oh my god, this thing that I was insecure about and had a genuine insecurity about is now fixed and I feel awesome and great. Instead, it's like now these things that are essentially made up insecurities that I never really even had and the internet just told me I should have, now I'm just attending to them. It's no longer like this wow boost of confidence. It's just like this moment of like, okay, that's done, like just a task that you check off. Something I also think about is this idea that like if you did this kind of like excessive amount of self-care in the morning, it would be seen as crazy, but if you do it at night, it's fine, which is just funny to me. Like if someone wakes up super early and like curls their hair, does their makeup, like goes full out, you would be like, you are doing too much, that's a lot. But because they're doing all of these things at night and it's seen as more of a natural process in which they're doing it, it's like not seen as so excessive, it's just seen as like, yeah, slay. I also think because there's like an ugly portion of the process, which like I don't know how else to explain it, but like that sleeping, like the way it looks is like kind of frightening, and then you get to like become like this caterpillar into like a butterfly. It's like a metamorphosis. It's almost seen as like a good thing. I don't know, it's such an odd idea. It also reminds me a lot of the memes that I would see that were like, I can't sleep over at my boyfriend's house because he doesn't have like my 10-step skincare routine, things like that. Or I've even seen videos where someone is like coming home from the bar and doing my 10-step skincare routine. Love that for you. Couldn't be me at all. Amazing, but like couldn't be me. But it does show how quickly these things are moving. It used to be the expectation that like taking off your makeup to go to sleep was like a good thing, right? Like you're like doing something great. But now it's like taking off your makeup and also doing a 10-step skincare routine and also putting your hair in heatless curls and also slugging your face and also putting on a face mask and now also putting on your chin strap and taping your mouth and putting your hair in like a silk bonnet, and like it's just like everything. Now you also have to do just like everything on top of that. And again, we're not fully there yet because the majority of people aren't doing that, but it does make you wonder, how long does it take to get there? Nearly every single person I know has some form of skincare routine, even if that skincare routine isn't really benefiting them at all. Like the amount of products that I have purchased because someone has told me to purchase it is pretty excessive. Not saying that's a good thing. Actually, I know it's not, because I have found through the process of trial and error that most of them don't work, and actually my skin tends to be better when I do very little to it versus doing too much. But this idea of like beauty and maintaining that beauty and like having to constantly find a way to become more beautiful is such an overarching theme of all of this. This idea of naturally being pretty, but like it's not natural because you're putting in so much time and effort, or doing these things that are high maintenance in order to be low maintenance, going to bed ugly so you can wake up pretty, and of course the morning shed. They all tie into this expectation and idea of what you should be doing and what you would be doing if you actually cared about yourself. And then it moralizes this idea of caring about yourself and self-care, and if you're not performing it correctly, you're doing something wrong. I think something about this is just so interesting and also a little bit insidious, because part of it is really bad. Sitting there and like moralizing something like self-care is objectively terrible. I think this idea that like spending money on self-care equals innately bad thing isn't totally fair either, but I also really understand the criticism of it. I think again, like it comes down to women are also human beings. So like naturally, if you're working 40 plus hours a week and you are forced to participate in capitalism, naturally you're going to want to spend money in order to participate in capitalism. But how far does that self-care go into the point of actual self-care? And then when does it come out and like it's not self-care, it's just like overconsumption, overdoing things, actually a little bit of self-hatred too. Where does self-care end and all of that begin? And I think the answer is it's really different for everyone, but I also think the answer is it's really different every single day. I think this notion of like forcing this routine upon yourself of like always having to do this morning shed, always having to do a 10-step skincare routine, always having to do XYZ isn't really fair for yourself. I think what all this kind of boils down to is how important it is to give yourself some grace and leniency within these forms of self-care and recognizing when self-care becomes a little bit more than that. And again, nothing wrong with it no longer being self-care, whether it's just like maintenance or whatever, but like make sure you're actually performing self-care instead of just maintenance all the time. And make sure your ways of self-care are things that are genuinely enjoyable to you and not just things that you think are self-care because the internet told you they are. Self-care is probably not buying 20 different body scrubs to show everyone you have 20 different body scrubs. It's probably not performing a 10 to 15 step skincare routine just because you have the means to be able to do it. It's probably not getting as much filler as you can put in your face into your face. It's not getting uncomfortable eyelash extensions that you don't really want, or at least I should say it's not always that. There's nothing wrong with treating yourself and enjoying the benefits of like what you've put into capitalism, but there's also a lot of validity in criticizing a little bit of where that money is going. Self-care might be taking some of that money that you would have spent and putting it into your 401k. Self-care might be taking a bath instead of booking a trip and putting it on a credit card. But self-maintenance is also a real thing and there's nothing wrong with that either. There is nothing wrong with having expectations of yourself and wanting to look a certain way and enjoying looking a certain way. But when you start putting that expectation on yourself to the point where it becomes uncomfortable or it's making you sad or you're finding that you can no longer even just enjoy the way you naturally look, I think that's where you need to kind of take a moment, step back and like really look at everything going on here. Maybe it means like it's time to work on your confidence. Maybe it means it's time to step back and think, maybe I'm consuming a little too much online and it's kind of eating my brain. And maybe honestly, you're doing just enough right now and it's the perfect equal amount and you're performing actual self-care while also performing maintenance and everything's great. It's not to make the assumption that people who do these routines are just innately hating themselves or performing self-care in a way that's bad. It's more to say that there's a little bit more to self-care than just this. The morning shed is not a requirement to exist in society, nor should it ever be seen that way. I think if it is seen as anything other than a little bit too much, we have a problem. But again, doing a little bit too much is also not totally a bad thing either. You are allowed to enjoy doing this thing that's a little bit avant-garde, a little bit silly, if it makes you happy. But consider, is it actually making you happy? Is it adding genuine benefit to your life? Is this something you are feeling forced to do every single day? Because if it is, now it is a job. It is not a hobby. It is not for fun. You are doing it to perform in some type of way, and that is so not sustainable or healthy. I think that this conversation is important, but I don't think there's a clear answer to any of it. I don't think self-care that isn't done properly is completely a bad thing. I think people are allowed to just like enjoy things in the way they want to enjoy things. But I think that when it becomes this sort of expectation and selling this idea that you have to be doing it to people, that's where it becomes a problem. Moral of the story is as long as you are doing something for you and you are having enough fun to where it seems like a good idea, then continue to do it. Have yourself a time. But at the point to where it is no longer serving you in the way you want it to serve you, maybe it's time to stop, set down the face mask, set down the chin strap, like always set down the chin strap. I'm really not over this. I think it's so silly. Actually, you know what? Scratch that. The moral of this story is Throw away your chin strap. You don't need it. It's not helping you. And also consult your doctor if you're having such severe sleep issues that you need to use mouth tape. But actually, if you're not having fun, you're not enjoying yourself, you feel like this is no longer benefiting you, it's harming you, stop right there, take a moment, take a breath, and consider what you're actually doing. Let me know what you guys think about this topic because I had so many mixed emotions, as you could tell. I feel like even writing down like the little like ideas that I had in my Google Doc, I was finding myself really like contradicting myself, and I think you'll notice that throughout a lot of this video. So you probably can hear my dog walking. If you could tell, I had like a lot of mixed thoughts on this and a lot of different places where I was jumping to, but I think because this is such an odd thing that evokes such a weird reaction where I'm like, what is happening? What is going on? That it brings up a lot of topics because it ties into so many things. The idea of the shed is not just like this form of self-care that's odd. It's also encompassing like a lot of results of capitalism and expectations that women have and like the societal beauty standard and anti-aging and so many different topics. And it's so weird to think about that that one thing could consume so much. And again, I don't innately think it's terrible, but I don't also think it's that good. If you guys are in a similar boat, let me know. Or even better, if you have like a straight up opinion on this, like this is good or bad, let me know because I feel like I could clearly be swayed either way. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. Do not forget to subscribe down below. I have some very exciting videos like this coming up, so I hope you guys will tune in for those. Also, let me know if you guys are enjoying the sweatsuit type of deal, or if you would like me to look more presentable. I can do that too, I guess. If you hate women. I'm obviously kidding. Thanks for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!